We're only a few days away from the 2021 NHL Entry Draft and the roster freeze to be lifted in order to see more activity around NHL teams. Today we're taking a look at the most likely trades and talking about players and picks that could be moved at the upcoming draft. And that's coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, today we're taking a look at the 2021 NHL Entry Draft and looking at all the rumors around trades that we might see happening at this event, which could involve players and picks and a combination of all of that. Now, obviously, there's a lot of big names that have been rumored to possibly be on the move that have not been traded as of yet. We're currently in a roster freeze. Of course, as I record this video, we have the expansion draft coming up later on today, which is Wednesday evening, July the 21st. And of course, starting tomorrow on Thursday, the roster freeze will be lifted and we'll head into full swing here looking at the entry draft, which is what we're talking about here today. So we're only a couple days away from seeing activity. We're only a couple days away from having the draft get underway. And you know that's usually a very common time to see lots of trades. Now, we talked about this sort of topic a couple of weeks ago, looking at some activity that we could likely see. And a fair bit has changed since then with what picks could be in play, what players have not yet been traded and all that. So I wanted to do an updated version of this video here today since we're getting so close to this event getting started. So we could see some significant trades at the draft, including guys like Jack Eichel, Rasmus Ristolainen, and Sam Reinhart of the Buffalo Sabres. They're all three players are in play here and could involve high first-round picks, possibly being included. Of course, there's Seth Jones in Columbus. That's another significant deal that has not happened as of yet. We have Vladimir Tarasenko, and there's other players as well. Now, of course, the expansion draft and what the Kraken do at that event will certainly have an impact on what we might see here as well, because they could claim some of the players that are rumored to be traded, because some of them are left exposed, and they very well could end up flipping them to other teams or making other types of trades that we could see here leading up to the draft, but not actually be part of the draft itself. Now, looking at what picks are really in play here, could the first overall pick even be in play? Would the Buffalo Sabres consider doing that? They currently hold the first overall selection in this draft. Many believe Owen Power is the player that will go first overall and be selected by the Buffalo Sabres, but there are a lot of reports indicating that the Sabres are extremely high on prospect William Eichel. Now, Eichel is not likely going first overall, but I guess there is a remote, slim possibility that the Sabres could do that. But there's been a lot of talk that they've been trying to maybe find other trades to acquire another high first-round pick amongst the players I mentioned that are likely going to be traded here soon to see if they can maybe get two high picks and walk away with this draft with Power and Eichel under their umbrella of prospects to go into their organization next season. That would be a huge haul if Buffalo was able to pull that off. But Eichel is likely going to be drafted in the top 5 is a real possibility here. I don't see him slipping too far before that. I mean, there is some mock drafts around from some scouts and different people around in the NHL that have him ranked a little bit lower, and he could see him go somewhere between 5 and 10. But I think the general consensus is that he really is a top-tier talent amongst the players that we're comparing him to, and that a top 5 selection is more than likely what we're going to see. Now, of course, you've got the Sabres at 1, you've got Seattle at 2, Anaheim at 3, New Jersey at 4, followed by Columbus at 5. Now, out of all those teams, really, which other teams would maybe trade their pick? Well, maybe Anaheim. I mean, Anaheim's another team here to maybe consider. So I don't know if Anaheim will come in as a last-minute suitor for Jack Eichel. Their latest rumors have them being out of the process. But if they jump back in and offer up that number 3 pick, that would be an awesome way for the Sabres to accomplish that goal. Now, you might be saying, why would the Sabres contemplate trading first overall? That doesn't make any sense. Well, you know what? There has been many times before that it's actually happened. The first overall pick has been traded on occasion in the past. There are times it makes sense. This is not one of these stronger drafts we've had in recent years. And if they're able to move down a spot or two and still get the player that they really want with their first pick and gain other assets as well, then you have to think that, you know, that's something that they might want to consider doing. I mean, if they really prefer Eichel over Power, do they just take him at that spot? Maybe they do. They have to be really confident that they're justified in doing so. Or do they talk to teams like Seattle or to Anaheim, New Jersey, and see where their heads are at with what players they might be picking and consider a move? Now, there was a recent article by John Vogel in The Athletic as well, kind of going over some different scenarios and exploring some scenarios where the Sabres could possibly consider making a trade of the first overall selection. So I wouldn't completely rule it out, although I do think it's quite unlikely. It's been a while since we've seen it happen. And, I'm just not sure that the Sabres are really in that kind of predicament, to really get an opportunity from teams like Seattle or Anaheim to be able to move up and really gain enough of an extra asset to really make it worthwhile. I think the main way they get Eichel in this draft is they either have to take him number one, or, like I said, if they do pull off a trade for a Jack Eichel or a Rasmus Ristolainen or a Sam Reinhart that involves one of those higher picks, then maybe that could happen. I mean, I don't see teams at the number 3, 4, 5 spot, though, giving up that pick unless it's Jack Eichel involved. I mean, out of all those teams, I think the Ducks are the really only ones that have a real legitimate shot at making it happen. I mean, I guess the Kraken, you never know. They're going to have lots of players and lots of assets. I wouldn't completely rule out Seattle out of anything at this point because they're starting here with a clean slate of cap space. They have 30 players they're going to be taking ahead of this entry draft, and you never know. They might have enough of a package to put together to make a consideration as well. Although at this point, we don't have any reason to believe that's really high on their radar list of things to look at, but you just never know. Like I said, you can't rule them out of anything. But another couple of picks that are likely going to be in play here, or that could be, is number 8 and 9, which is LA and Vancouver. There are reports that both those teams are more than willing to trade the pick for the right package going back to them. For example, they're both also teams that have been linked to Sam Reinhart of the Buffalo Sabres. As I mentioned, I don't see the higher picks being justifiable to get Reinhart, that they're more Eichel worthy if you're going to make that kind of deal. But at 8 and 9, there are certainly possible that Reinhart could be involved. I mean, especially if you look at the rumored package for Reinhart right now is a first-round pick and a prospect. So if either of those teams are willing to throw in a decent prospect with that pick, that very well likely could get the deal done, and Sam Reinhart could be on his way to join his new team. Now, looking at the other major players in the Jack Eichel sweepstakes, you get the New York Rangers, you get the Minnesota Wild, as we've talked about recently. The Wild do hold 2 first-round picks, but they're both lower. I mean, obviously, they made the playoffs this year, so their pick's a little lower. They also have the pick of the Pittsburgh Penguins, so they have 2 picks in the 20s. I'm not sure if that's really going to be super enticing in an Eichel trade, but you know what? If you throw in both of them, along with 2 or 3 other assets, then there is a possibility that could be a deal to be had as well. I mean, it's rumored that they would consider including one of their top prospects like Rossi or Boldy, along with a roster player like a Fiala or a Dumba, and you throw those 2 first-rounders in there. Maybe one other asset, maybe have a lower-level pick or a prospect. I know there also was interest from the Sabres on Kakkonen, but of course he could be Seattle-bound, so that may not be an option by the time the draft comes around for this kind of trade. But either way, like the Wild certainly have some assets there that could be intriguing here to possibly get something done. I mean, the Rangers have pick number 16 as well, so that's another pick that could be involved if the Rangers do pull off an Eichel trade, because like I said, with the Rangers and the Wild being the front runners according to insider reports, you never know. If they do pull off a trade, that likely would be a pick that would be involved in a package, as we've talked about in recent videos here as well. Now, another thing that we very well could see at this NHL draft is 2 goaltenders going early, not only in the first round, but possibly higher in the first round in the top 10 or 15 selections. It wouldn't be completely shocking to see teams like Detroit or San Jose at that 6-7 spot consider taking a guy like Jesper Wallstedt. The Swedish goaltender is expected to be, at least at this point, the top goaltender gone in this draft, and very well could be a top 10 selection. Both of those teams are not having the deepest prospect pools at the moment, and both don't really have a clear-cut goaltender of the future, in my opinion, so they could certainly use that kind of player. The problem is, though, is they could certainly use other pieces too, so it's debatable if they do use that pick that early on a goaltender or not. And whenever the first goalie goes in the draft, it's probably going to put a little bit of pressure on some of the other teams that are kind of interested in one of the top 2 goalies, because Sebastian Cossa of the WHL is certainly getting a ton of attention as well, and is also very highly likely to go mid to high in the first round. If San Jose and Detroit don't go back-to-back and both take goalies, which many are not predicting at this point, I would suspect a team like the Senators at number 10. Apparently, they're seriously considering it as well. I know I've heard interviews by Trent Mann recently, their head scout, talking about that possibility and talking about how a lot of the OHL players have not really played much in the last year and a half, and that they might prefer to go with a goaltender that they've actually been able to see play a little bit more than some of the Ontario prospects. Other prospects throughout Canada, you could say the same thing even in the U.S. Like, there hasn't been as much hockey as you would like to have seen, so they might be more willing to gamble on a player who looks to be a really solid guy. Like Cossa, to me, very well could even be as good or better than Wallstedt in this draft. He's extremely athletic. He's huge when it comes to his size. You're kind of a unique goaltender that could very well be a star in the NHL. And even though the Sens do have a pretty good depth right now in the goalie prospect of their system, you know what? They have a possible scenario that they could be facing, which we'll know by the time we get to the draft, that they could be losing a younger goalie in the expansion draft. Both Joey Decord is available, Matt Murray is available, who's the current starting goaltender, and they could certainly, have one less guy in the system there that they might want to consider. But besides that, they have Gustafsson, who's protected. They know he's going to be coming back. They have Mads Sogard as well, who came out of junior and signed last year, had a phenomenal season. So they have a couple of really good prospects there. Plus, if they can keep Decord, maybe it doesn't make sense to take Cossa, but if you really think he's going to be better than all the goalie prospects you already have in your system, you know what? It's a good problem to have that many goalies who can play and make the NHL. Down the road, you probably trade a few of them. They can be in the system, work together, push each other. It's not a terrible problem to have, especially considering that the Sens are pretty deep in a lot of other areas for prospects. And it just really boils down to what else is available at that spot when they get there. They haven't picked as low as 10 in the last few years. So obviously that shows they're improving, moving up in the standings. And they obviously have different needs than they did over the past few years. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle that selection here as well. Now, as I mentioned, the Columbus Blue Jackets are another team to watch here. They already have 3 first-round picks, and they have Seth Jones, who is almost a guarantee to be traded, if not at the draft, then sometime after. He's definitely not going to be wearing a Jackets uniform next year. At least it seems extremely unlikely that we're going to see that. So at this point, Jones is entering the final year of his contract. He's made it perfectly clear he has no intention to re-sign an extension. We've heard different teams being interested over the last number of weeks. Some are now kind of ruled out of the equation, like the Flyers, after making other moves, but it seems to be pretty likely that a team like Dallas or Chicago at this point at least seem to be the front runners. Now, they both have decent looking first round picks. Neither team were a playoff team, so they're in the top 15, and they could be an attractive piece here to the Jackets, along with some other assets that could be possibly included. I know on the Dallas side of things, there's a concern that they may not be able to sign John Klingberg. He's down to 1 year in his contract, about $4.25 million. They just signed Heiskanen to a massive contract, $8.45 a year. And if they bring in a guy like Jones, then it certainly makes a guy like Klingberg expendable and difficult to sign. So it would make sense that they would consider including him in the trade. And like I said, their first rounder could be in play as well. Maybe Klingberg doesn't go directly to Columbus. Maybe there's a third team involved. Maybe there's a separate deal to shed money. It could go about it in a variety of different ways, but it's still players that could likely find themselves on the move as a potential domino effect if they're not indeed included in the same trade. So you could see a team like Columbus, who already has pick number 5, number 24, and number 32 could certainly add more to the mix here and get another top 15 selection. And then you know what? Maybe they take those 2 lower picks and try to trade them together, maybe to get another higher pick. Like, it's quite possible Columbus could end up with as many as maybe 4 first rounders in this draft, which they could then maybe consolidate by trade and end up with 2 to 3 really high selections and get a couple of really good-looking prospects out of this draft. Columbus is really well positioned that way, so I do expect them to be a player when it comes to making moves. And the Seth Jones trade would be a prime time, like I said, to get this done at the draft with some other high first-round picks possibly in play here. Now, you also see a team like New Jersey, who's rumored to be trading PK Subban. I'm not sure he can fetch a first-round pick at this point, but if they had a larger trade, maybe packaging him with another piece, then maybe that can happen. The Devils already have multiple first-round picks. They have their own at number 4. They also have the pick, which is a late first rounder of the New York Islanders. So I can see maybe a scenario where at the very least they're a team that could be active. They acquired Subban at the draft a few years ago, and now that he's entering the final year of his deal, teams in a little bit of a different spot than they were at that point, and it seems as though a trade for PK, with a big chunk of salary retained, going to a new team is quite a likely scenario. We do see possibly at play here, which could happen at the draft as well, and it only makes sense, like I said, that maybe another pick, even if it's not a first rounder, it could be a later pick involved in that trade going to the Devils as they continue to build here for the future. But obviously lots of teams expected to be active. The main teams, though, are the teams near the top of this draft, in the top 15 that I expect to see the most active. Like I said, the Sabres are definitely going to be active, where they have that first overall pick, but they really want Eichel. They have 3 top players that could all drive either first or second round picks as part of packages to acquire more assets. You get the LA Kings and the Vancouver Canucks at 8-9 that are pretty open to trading those picks as well. You get some teams like Detroit, San Jose, Ottawa with goaltenders. Maybe they change their mind on the goalies and move the picks if the player they want's not there. I think all those picks could possibly be in play depending on what is available via trade. So, I mean, there's all kinds of activity that I'd suspect. I said Columbus is another team to watch out for. Dallas, Chicago, decent amount of teams are going to be making moves. It could be a very, very busy time of trade activity, not only at the draft, but the day leading into it. Would not be surprised at all on Thursday when the roster freeze is lifted that we start to see a big amount of activity leading into the draft, because there's all kinds of energy around trade talks that are put on hold here for the expansion draft. It's a flat cap. Teams are looking to shed money. They need to move players around. So it should be an extremely busy time. So I encourage you to certainly follow Top Shelf Hockey. I'll keep you up to date with all the latest news and rumors on all 32 NHL teams. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any content leading into this extremely busy time of year. There is going to be a slew of videos with all the latest activity to keep you up to date with everything. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.